Ethan Carter and his friends were disgusted when they saw Ava Johnson make the cheer squad at Westfield High. To them, she was nothing more than a black girl, out of place among their pristine, blonde cheerleaders. They couldn't stand the idea of her there, and they thought the best way to handle it was to push her out, by any means necessary. What they didn't know was that Ava wasn't the type to back down. Beneath her calm exterior was something they couldn't even begin to fathom, a training that only a Navy SEAL father could provide. They thought she'd cower. They thought she'd break. Ethan was about to learn just how wrong he was. Ava wasn't just some victim. She was a soldier's daughter, and she was about to show them the power of underestimating her. The gym was thick with anticipation as 23 girls stood in line for the final cheer team announcements. Ava stood third from the left, feeling a nervous flutter in her chest, but she kept her hands steady at her sides. She had crushed every routine, hit every mark, and smiled until her face ached over the last 3 days of intense tryouts. "Ladies, your dedication has been exceptional," Coach Peterson began, her voice calm but firm as she clutched her clipboard like armor. "This year's Westfield High varsity cheer team will represent the spirit of this school with pride and excellence." Ava scanned the room, her eyes catching the sea of blonde ponytails and bronze skin. She noticed the football team walking in from the side doors, fresh from practice. Ethan Carter led them, his quarterback swagger still intact, even in his sweaty gear. "The following girls have earned their place on this year's squad," Coach Peterson announced, reading the names one by one. Each girl was greeted with cheers and hugs. "Ava Johnson!" The word struck her like a lightning bolt. She made it. Against all odds, she was in. Congratulations flowed around her, but Ava could feel the undercurrent of surprise from some of the girls. She kept her face neutral, just like her father had taught her. From the other side of the gym, she caught Ethan's gaze. His jaw was tight, his eyes locked on her. He leaned toward Tyler, whispering something that made Tyler's face twist in disgust. "Congratulations to our new Eagles." Coach Peterson clapped, the cheerleaders around her erupting into applause. "We'll have a team meeting tomorrow after school. Lots to prepare for homecoming." As the excitement swirled around her, Ava grabbed her gym bag, her pulse quickening as she made her way toward the door. The football players had positioned themselves by the door, clearly waiting for her. Ava felt her heart race, but she kept her composure. "Excuse me," she said politely, attempting to pass them. Ethan stepped just enough to the side, but not enough to let her through easily. "So you're the new face of our cheer squad," Ethan said, his voice dripping with mock interest. "That's right," Ava replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Interesting choice by Coach Peterson." Tyler's voice followed, loud enough for a few students nearby to overhear. "Very progressive." "I earned my spot just like anyone else," Ava shot back evenly, her voice steady. Dylan shifted uneasily, but stayed quiet as Ethan smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes, empty and cold. "Oh, I'm sure you did," Ethan sneered. "It's just that our fans have certain expectations about what their cheerleaders should look like." His words lingered in the air, thick with disdain. Conversations around them slowed as other students began to sense the tension. "And what exactly should they look like?" Ava asked, her voice calm, though her heart was racing. "You know," Ethan shrugged, "traditional. The kind of girls who represent Eagle pride, blonde hair, school spirit, the whole package, like Barbie dolls." Ava tilted her head slightly. "I understand perfectly," she said, her voice steady. "This school is about excellence, academics, and representing our community with pride. And that's exactly what I plan to do." Ethan's smile flickered for a second but returned, more forced than before. "We'll see about that," Ethan said, his smile hardening. "Football season's a long road. Lots of games, lots of pressure. Not everyone's cut out for it. Good thing I am." She pushed past them without a second glance, feeling the weight of their stares digging into her back. The three boys stood there watching her every move, their eyes full of contempt as students filtered past them, heading to the parking lot. "Are you serious?" Ethan muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, just for his friends. "They actually put her on the squad." Tyler spat loudly, his disgust palpable. This is exactly what's wrong with this place. What's next? Are they going to make us kneel for the anthem too? What if she thinks she's better than everyone else? Dylan hesitated, his voice shaky but trying to keep up with the others. Like she's all high and mighty, acting like she's better than us. Oh, she thinks she's something special, Ethan sneered, his jaw locked tight. Did you see how she looked at us? Like we were the ones with the problem. Tyler's face contorted with disgust. I'm not cheering next to that, he spat. My dad's going to lose it when he finds out they put some diversity hire on the squad instead of Ashley Martinez. She's been waiting for 2 years. It's not right. Ethan shook his head, his voice dripping with disdain. Our fans don't want to see that representing our school. They want real Eagle girls, not some... He left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear, even to his friends. Dylan nodded enthusiastically, his desperation to fit in clear. Yeah, exactly. What are people going to think when they see our cheerleaders? This isn't that kind of school. Well, she's about to find out what kind of school this really is, Tyler said, his voice low and menacing as he cracked his knuckles. Football season's gonna teach her some real lessons. Ethan's smile returned, but it was cold, calculated. Oh yeah, real educational. The harassment began subtly, almost too small to notice at first. Monday morning, Ava arrived at her locker and found it slightly open. Her combination lock was left undone, and her books had been rearranged. Nothing was taken, just a quiet, unnerving disruption. Ava quickly glanced around the hallway and locked eyes with Ethan Carter, 3 lockers down. He was chatting with some sophomore girl, but his gaze kept shifting back to her, dark and calculating. That's weird, Ava muttered under her breath, trying to shake off the unease as she rearranged her books. By third period, everyone knew about the new cheer roster. Ava could feel the weight of every stare, hear the hushed whispers that stopped as soon as she walked by. Some students offered encouraging smiles, but others looked at her with confusion, as if she were a puzzle they couldn't quite figure out. Hey, Ava! Madison Clark, a senior cheerleader, caught up with her after English class. I'm so excited you made the team. It's going to be an amazing season. Thanks, Madison. I'm really excited to get started. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't belong here, Madison added, her voice earnest. You earned your spot just like the rest of us. The fact that Madison felt the need to say it confirmed Ava's suspicions. People were definitely talking. At lunch, as she sat with her usual group of Honor Society friends, Tyler Knox walked past, his shoulder hitting her chair so hard it sent her backward. Oops, Tyler muttered, not even pausing to glance at her. Sorry about that. Jessica frowned, clearly disturbed. That was strange. Tyler's never that clumsy. Maybe he's just having an off day, Ava said casually, but her mind was already cataloging the incident, analyzing it. The real message came during 7th period study hall. Ava checked her phone to see the time, but noticed a new notification from Instagram. Someone had tagged her in a post. Ava opened the message, her stomach sinking as she saw the image. A screenshot of the school's announcement about the new cheer team. Ava's name circled in red. The caption read, "Guess Westfield's going woke now. Rip real Eagle pride. Fran, not my cheerleader." It already had 37 likes, and the comments were enough to twist her insides with disgust. Most comments danced around outright slurs, but their meaning was unmistakable. Diversity hire much? She doesn't even belong here. There goes the neighborhood. Ava quickly screenshot everything before blocking the account. Eagle Pride 2024, a name as fake as the user's intentions. Ava's hands trembled as she shoved her phone into her bag. The tension was thick at cheer practice that afternoon. Coach Peterson called out the usual warm-up drills, but Ava could feel the weight of sideways glances from some teammates. While Madison and a few others offered genuine smiles, others kept their distance, watching to see how things would unfold. All right, ladies, let's go through the homecoming routine again, Coach Peterson called out. Ava, for now, you'll be in the back row until you get the hang of the formations. As they lined up, Brittany Stevens, a junior with flawless, curled blonde hair, made sure to position herself directly in front of Ava. During the routine, Brittany took small steps back, forcing Ava to constantly adjust her spacing. "Sorry," Brittany would whisper each time, her voice dripping with false sincerity, still getting used to the new formation. By the end of practice, Ava had been stepped on twice and elbowed once during the turn sequence. Each accident was followed by Brittany's forced apology and that same insincere smile. As Ava walked to her car afterward, she noticed the football team wrapping up practice on the adjacent field. Ethan Carter was deep in conversation with Coach Reynolds, both of them glancing toward the parking lot where the cheerleaders were loading up. Ava's phone buzzed in her hand. It was a message from her father. "How was practice, Warrior?" She typed "fine," but quickly deleted it. "Good, just learning the routines. Pick you up for dinner. Want to hear all about it? I'll drive myself home. See you soon." Later that evening, Ava sat across from her father at the kitchen table, pushing her grilled chicken around on her plate as Commander Johnson's eyes never left her. His gaze was as intense as the focus he used when training his team. "You're quiet tonight," he said, studying her. "Just tired," Ava responded, forcing a small smile. "New team, lots to learn." Commander Johnson set his fork down, his eyes sharp as ever. "And how are your new teammates treating you?" Ava hesitated, her mind racing. Her father had always drilled into her to be honest about threats, but she knew his protective instincts too well. "Most of them are fine," Ava replied cautiously. "There's always an adjustment period." "What about the ones who aren't fine?" Her father's voice was sharper now, and Ava looked up at him, startled. "What makes you think that?" His voice was calm, but it carried the kind of authority he used when interrogating enemies. "I didn't raise you to lie to me, especially about your safety. What's going on?" Ava sighed, pulling out her phone and showing him the Instagram post. As he read through the comments, his face darkened. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "Anonymous posts, accidents during practice, little territorial games. They're testing you, seeing how you'll react." "So what's my next move?" Ava asked, her voice steady but laced with frustration. "Document everything," Commander Johnson replied, his voice low and deliberate. "Screenshots, witness statements, times, dates. Don't react yet. Let them show their hand first. And if it escalates..." His smile was sharp and cold. "We'll have plenty of options. But for now, stay smart. You're not the kind of girl they're used to pushing around." As Ava climbed the stairs to her room to work on homework, she didn't notice the black pickup truck parked across the street for the past hour, nor the three figures inside, eyes narrowed with growing malice. Tomorrow would bring fresh challenges, and Ethan Carter was already scheming his next move. Over the next 2 weeks, the harassment grew steadily, like water gathering behind a dam. Tuesday morning, Ava opened her gym locker to find her cheer shoes missing. She had left them there after practice the night before, and now they were gone. Coach Peterson was forced to lend her an old worn-out pair of shoes that were 2 sizes too large. "That's strange," Madison said, her brow furrowed. "Who would take someone's shoes?" "Maybe they just fell out," Brittany chimed in, pretending to care. "These old lockers are so unreliable." Ava didn't respond, but she caught Ethan Carter's smirk in chemistry class, his eyes lingering on her oversized shoes. Wednesday brought a new level of cruelty. Ava found a banana on her car windshield with a note that read, "Monkey see, monkey do." She crumpled the paper, her hands shaking with anger as she threw both the banana and the note into the trash, feeling the weight of their insult. Thursday, Ava arrived at her locker to find it vandalized. Someone had scratched "Go home" into the metal door. When she reported it to Principal Martinez, he sighed heavily, as if this was just another minor inconvenience. "I'll have maintenance look into it," he muttered. "But vandalism is tough to prove without witnesses." He shifted uncomfortably. "Are you sure you want to make a big deal out of this? Sometimes it's better to let these things pass." Ava's voice was calm but biting. "So, I'm supposed to just accept someone destroying school property because of my race?" "Now, Ava," Principal Martinez said, shifting uncomfortably. "Let's not jump to conclusions about the motivation." "What other motivation could there be?" Ava shot back, her patience thinning. Principal Martinez shifted uncomfortably. "I'll talk to some students, see what I can find out. In the meantime, maybe keep a low profile." That afternoon, the real message came loud and clear. As Ava walked past the football table, Tyler Knox stuck his foot out, tripping her. She stumbled but quickly caught herself. "Watch where you're going," Tyler snapped, his voice loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "You tripped me." Tyler stood up, towering over her at 6 feet 3 inches. "You calling me a liar?" he growled. The entire cafeteria fell silent. Ethan Carter and Dylan Mitchell flanked him, creating an impenetrable wall of Letterman jackets. "I'm saying you need to move your foot," Ava responded calmly, her voice steady despite the heat building inside her. "Or what?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice dripping with mockery. "You going to run crying to Daddy? Oh wait, I heard he's some big military guy. Must be embarrassing having a daughter who can't handle high school." The words landed like a slap to her face. Ava felt the heat rush to her cheeks, but she kept her voice even. "At least my father taught me how to be a decent human being." Tyler's face turned a deep shade of red. "You think you're better than us? Walking around here like you own the place?" "I think I belong here just as much as anyone else," Ava replied firmly. Dylan finally spoke up, his voice trembling, but trying to keep up the front. "You really don't." Several students had pulled out their phones, sensing the drama unfolding. Ava realized she was outnumbered, surrounded by dozens of cameras, each one potentially recording her humiliation. "We'll see about that," Ava muttered under her breath, then turned and walked away, her head held high. Behind her, Ethan's voice echoed across the cafeteria, filled with venom. "Yeah, walk away. That's what you people do best." The words, "you people," echoed in Ava's mind all day, each one a painful reminder of their hatred. Friday brought the turning point, the incident that would change everything. It was game day, and the entire school hummed with excitement for the homecoming game. Ava had worked hard enough on the routines to move up to the second row, and despite the pressure, a genuine thrill ran through her veins at the thought of performing in front of the crowd. As Ava made her way toward the gym for final preparations, she noticed the puddle, a deep, muddy depression outside the entrance, about 3 feet wide and 6 inches deep. Most students casually walked around it, not giving it a second thought. Ava was texting her father, confirming pickup plans, when she heard footsteps behind her. Before she could even react, she felt a strong grip on her left arm. Ethan Carter had grabbed her. "Hey, new girl, got a little message for you," Ethan sneered. Before she could even pull away, Tyler Knox grabbed her right arm, while Dylan Mitchell stood strategically to block anyone's view from the parking lot. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Ava demanded, her voice sharp. "Teaching you a lesson about knowing your place," Ethan growled. With an abrupt shove, they pushed her backward, closer to the puddle. Ava tried to plant her heels, but her sneakers slid uselessly on the wet concrete. "Stop it!" she shouted, her voice rising in defiance. Several students turned, sensing the tension. "Oops!" Tyler mocked as they pushed her one last time. Ava crashed into the muddy water, her uniform skirt tearing on a jagged piece of concrete buried beneath the surface. Cold, dirty water soaked her clothes as she struggled to push herself back up. The 3 boys stood over her, grinning like wolves, their satisfaction no longer hidden. "Looks like you slipped," Ethan said, his voice mocking. "How clumsy." Several cheerleaders had come outside, attracted by the noise. Madison gasped and rushed to her side. "Oh my God, Ava, are you okay?" "I'm fine," Ava managed to choke out. Her voice cracked as she tried to steady herself. Mud streaked her face and arms, and her torn uniform laid bare not just her skin, but the humiliation they'd just imposed. Brittany Stevens whipped out her phone, a smirk on her face. "This is going on Instagram. We're your epic fail." "Don't you dare," Madison snapped, her voice filled with urgency. But Ava already knew it was too late. By tonight, her humiliation would be viral, spreading like wildfire through the school. The football players turned and walked away, high-fiving each other as if they had just won the game. "Nice uniform," Tyler called over his shoulder, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Really brings out your eyes," Ethan laughed cruelly. "Maybe now you'll think twice about where you belong." Ava sat in the mud for a few more seconds, not because she couldn't get up, but because she needed to burn this moment into her memory. The cold, disgusting mud seeping through her clothes, the sound of their laughter echoing in her ears, the bitter taste of humiliation, Most importantly, the certainty that this would never happen again. Madison helped her to her feet, offering tissues and muttered apologies. But Ava barely heard her. Her mind was already elsewhere, on her father's voice. Sometimes you have to create your own justice when the system fails you. Tonight she would tell him everything. Tomorrow the real fight would begin. Ava sat in her car in the school parking lot for 20 minutes after the game, still wearing her torn, muddy uniform. The Eagles had won, 28-14, and the sounds of celebration echoed from the fieldhouse. But the victory felt hollow, empty. She had watched the entire game from the sidelines, dressed in a borrowed uniform that hung loosely on her frame, an ever-present reminder of her humiliation. Her phone buzzed with texts, some supportive from Madison and her Honor Society friends, others filled with links to social media posts that made her stomach churn. The video of her being shoved into the puddle had already been shared 43 times, with captions like, "Diversity hire gets reality check," and "When keeping it real goes wrong." Ava's blood boiled as she read each cruel comment. Ava drove home in silence, the weight of the day pressing on her. When she entered the kitchen, Commander Johnson was already waiting for her, his eyes narrowing at the sight of her muddy, torn uniform. He placed his coffee mug down slowly, the quiet clicking of ceramic filling the space. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low, betraying none of his concern. Ava had planned to soften the blow, starting with the smaller incidents and working her way up. But as she met her father's gaze, calm, calculated, like he was about to lead a covert mission, she couldn't hold it in. The words spilled out in one breath. "It's Ethan, Tyler, and Dylan," she said, her voice steady despite the fire bubbling inside. "They've been harassing me since I made the team. It started with their comments, how I didn't belong. Then my shoes went missing, my locker was vandalized, and they spread those posts on social media. But today they shoved me into a puddle in front of everyone and tore my uniform." Her father's expression darkened with each word, his silence louder than any response. When Ava finished, the silence hung thick in the air, like a storm before it broke. "Show me the posts," he said, his voice a whisper of controlled fury. Ava handed over her phone, watching as her father scrolled through the posts. With each new comment, his jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck visibly tightening. "And the school's response?" Ava added. "Principal Martinez told me to keep a low profile. Let it blow over." Her father's eyes darkened, something dangerous flickering behind them. "Did he now?" "Dad, I know what you're thinking," Ava began, but he cut her off with his steady gaze. "You want to handle this yourself, right?" Ava finished for him, looking straight into his eyes. "But doing that will only make things worse for me. They'll twist it and say I can't fight my own battles." Commander Johnson paused, studying her for a moment, before nodding slowly. "You're right," he said, his voice growing colder. "But this cannot continue." "I know, that's why I need you to teach me," Ava said, her voice steady, challenging. "Teach you what?" her father asked. Ava met his eyes unflinching. "Everything. How to defend myself, how to fight back, how to make sure this never happens again." Her father was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable as he processed her words. "Physical confrontation should always be a last resort," he said, his voice measured. "But they've already crossed that line," he continued, his voice suddenly steely. "They put their hands on you today. They've made their choice." "Fair point," Ava said, nodding slowly. Commander Johnson leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "There are other ways to handle bullies," he said quietly. "Strategic ways. Ways that leave them no room to play the victim." "What do you mean?" Ava asked, her brow furrowing. Commander Johnson smiled faintly, coldly. "I mean, you're David Johnson's daughter. You're smarter than those boys, more disciplined. And you have something they don't," Ava asked, her curiosity piqued. "Patience," Commander Johnson replied, his voice calm but deadly serious. "And a father who spent 20 years learning how to neutralize threats." He looked at Ava, eyes sharpening. "Tell me everything you know about them. Schedules, habits, weaknesses." Meanwhile, across town, the three football players gathered at Ethan Carter's house. The air was thick with smug satisfaction, each of them relishing the power they just displayed. Did you see her face when she hit that puddle? Dylan laughed, sipping from the stolen beer. Priceless. The best part was watching her try to act tough afterward, Tyler added, his voice oozing with mockery. Like she wasn't completely humiliated. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his grin widening. That should send the message. She doesn't belong here, and we're not going to pretend she does. Think she'll quit the team? Dylan asked, his voice laced with anticipation. Nah, Tyler said, shaking his head. Girls like her are stubborn. She'll double down, try to prove something. Then we'll have to get creative, Ethan said, a cold glint in his eye. Can't have her thinking she can just ignore us. What if she tells someone? Like her parents or whatever, Dylan asked, unease creeping into his voice. Tyler snorted, dismissing the concern. Tell them what? That she's clumsy and fell in a puddle? We didn't do anything wrong. Just 3 guys walking to practice who happened to be near when she tripped. Exactly, Ethan replied, his confidence unshaken. Even if she tries to make something of this, who's going to believe her over us? Ethan's voice dripped with arrogance. My dad practically built this new gym. Tyler's dad sits on the school board. We're untouchable here. And she? He threw his hands up, mocking the idea of her belonging. Dylan nodded eagerly, desperate to stay in their good graces. And Coach Reynolds? He's got our backs. Principal Martinez won't dare challenge us over some diversity hire with a tude problem. Tyler pulled out his phone, grinning. Speaking of, look at this. He showed them a thread of messages from the football team and their girlfriends. The video of Ava's humiliation, spreading like wildfire. With each repost, the comments grew uglier, more venomous. Tommy Williams' girlfriend's about to quit if we don't do something about this, Tyler reported, his voice mocking. Seems like even some of the girls are starting to feel uncomfortable. Good, Ethan said coldly, a smirk playing on his lips. Let them squirm. Maybe the pressure will make Coach Peterson change the roster. What if that doesn't work? Dylan asked, his voice shaky, yet trying to match Ethan's intensity. Ethan's face darkened, the smile gone. Then we escalate it, Ethan said with ruthless finality. Make her so miserable, so unwanted that she has no choice but to transfer schools. Tyler leaned forward, intrigued. His eyes narrowed in dark excitement. As far as it takes, Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. This is our school, our team, our traditions. I'm not letting some outsider tear it all down. Back at the Johnson house, father and daughter sat across from each other, the weight of their plans settling in. The key to any operation is intelligence, Commander Johnson explained, his voice steady as steel. You need to know your enemies better than they know themselves. What drives them? What are their weaknesses? Ethan Carter's the leader, Ava said, her voice cool and calculating. He's the star quarterback, comes from money. His father owns Carter Construction, practically built this town. He's being scouted by colleges. Football's his ticket. That's his vulnerability. Good, her father nodded. What about the others? Tyler Knox's dad sits on the school board, Ava continued. Tyler's not as sharp as Ethan, but he's more dangerous, violent. I think he's a scholarship kid. Football is his way out. And Dylan Mitchell, he's just a follower, desperate to fit in. Parents are divorced, lives with his mom. Commander Johnson nodded with approval, his expression serious. You've been paying attention. Lesson 1, he said, leaning forward. Never strike when they expect it. They're feeling untouchable right now. That's when they make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Ava asked, her curiosity piqued. The kind that leave evidence, he said with a sharp smile. The kind that expose them for who they really are. He stood up, his eyes narrowing. But first, we need to make sure you can protect yourself if things get physical again. Ava asked, her heart racing. I mean survival training. There's a difference, Commander Johnson replied, his expression growing deadly serious. What happened today was just the beginning. They'll escalate because you didn't break. Are you prepared for that? Ava thought about the mud that had soaked through her uniform, the sound of their laughter, and the cameras that had recorded her every moment of humiliation. I'm prepared for whatever it takes, she said, her voice hard with resolve. Then we start tomorrow. But remember, he said with a cold smile, we're not just teaching you how to fight, we're teaching you how to win. Saturday morning, Ava's world shifted as she stepped into the basement, a space transformed by years of her father's preparation. At 6 a.m., they started in the basement, a makeshift training space her father had set up years ago. Punching bags hung from the ceiling, and thick mats covered the cold concrete floor. "Forget everything you think you know about fighting," her father began. His voice clipped and cold as he circled her like a predator. "Movies, TV, video games, those are distractions. Real combat is about efficiency. It's about survival," Ava asked, her eyes focused on him, her body tensed for the lesson. "I mean," he said, his gaze hardening, "you don't waste energy on fancy moves or dramatic gestures. You identify the threat, neutralize it, and get out in 3 seconds or less. You identify the threat, neutralize it, and get out. 3 seconds or less." Commander Johnson's voice was a steady drumbeat, his gaze sharp as he demonstrated the precision of his moves. A crushing strike to the windpipe, a knee to the solar plexus, a stomp to break the instep. He moved with the efficiency of a predator. Ava stood motionless, her eyes fixed on her father, committing every movement to memory. "Before you fight, you observe," he continued, his tone sharpening. "You learn their weaknesses, their blind spots. Sun Tzu said, 'The supreme excellence is to subdue the enemy without fighting, and we will subdue them, strategically.' You study everything," he said. "Where they go, who they talk to, what they value. Information is power, and power is leverage." The next hour passed in a blur of drills: how to break a grip, how to create space, how to strike fast and hard despite her smaller frame. Ava's muscles screamed in protest, but she ignored it, focusing only on the goal ahead. Her muscles burned, her body pleading for a break, but she pushed through, absorbing every word. "Your advantage isn't strength," her father said. "It's speed, intelligence, and the element of surprise. They expect you to be a victim. Use that assumption to your advantage." By 8 a.m., Ava was drained, but there was a spark of something else inside her now: determination. Her father handed her a water bottle, his eyes as hard as ever. "Your homework starts now. I want every detail on them. Where they park, when they leave, who they talk to, everything." "Your homework starts now," Commander Johnson said, the words carrying the weight of a command. "I need detailed intelligence. Where they park, who they talk to, their habits, their patterns, everything." "How do I do that without looking suspicious?" Ava asked, already anticipating the answer. Commander Johnson smiled, cold and calculating. "You learn to be invisible. Watch, listen, become part of the background, like a spy. Exactly like a spy." Monday morning, Ava began her surveillance. She arrived at school 30 minutes early, hiding behind the library's shelves, her eyes scanning the student parking lot. At exactly 7:47 a.m., Ethan Carter's black Dodge Challenger rolled into the parking lot, stopping in the same spot by the gym entrance. 3 minutes later, Tyler Knox's beat-up Ford truck crept into the lot, parking 2 rows behind Ethan's Challenger. Last to arrive was Dylan Mitchell, his mother dropping him off in a dusty silver Honda Civic. During lunch, Ava positioned herself strategically, sitting with her back to the football table. Her phone's camera discreetly recorded their every word. Ethan dominated most of the conversations, his voice dripping with entitlement. Tyler threw in aggressive commentary while Dylan awkwardly laughed, unsure but trying to fit in. Between classes, Ava studied their routes. Ethan always took the long path to avoid crowds. Tyler weaved through the arts hallway where teachers rarely roamed, while Dylan trailed behind whoever was closest. After 3 days, Ava had 15 pages of meticulously detailed notes. "Excellent work," her father said, flipping through her notes. "Now tell me, what have you learned about their weaknesses?" "Ethan's whole identity revolves around football," Ava said, her voice steady. "He's being recruited by top colleges. Football's everything to him. Tyler's family is struggling financially," she continued. "I overheard him arguing with his girlfriend about not being able to afford the homecoming dinner. And Dylan? He's just desperate to fit in," Ava added, her eyes narrowing. "Good. Now what would hit them hardest?" her father asked, leaning in. Ava took a moment, considering. Ethan would lose everything if his college offers disappeared. Tyler needs that scholarship to go anywhere. And Dylan? He'd collapse if Ethan and Tyler rejected him. And how can we take those college prospects away? Commander Johnson pressed. If they got in serious trouble, real trouble, Commander Johnson nodded, his approval in his gaze. Or if evidence of unacceptable behavior surfaces, college recruiters don't tolerate certain things? What kind of evidence? Ava asked. Commander Johnson's eyes gleamed. That depends on what they're hiding. Everyone has secrets, Ava. The trick is finding them. Meanwhile, the three boys' harassment grew bolder, the toxic arrogance of entitlement bleeding through. Convinced that Ava's continued presence meant weakness, they planned something more sinister than stolen shoes or muddy pranks. That evening, back at home, Ava sat at her desk, the glow of her laptop illuminating her determined face as she meticulously updated her intelligence files. The knock on her bedroom door interrupted her focus. How's the mission going? Commander Johnson's voice was steady, like a soldier's. I've got a read on them now, Ava replied, her voice calm but sharp. Ethan's the brains, Tyler's the muscle, and Dylan, he's the weak link. Weak links can be useful, her father observed, his eyes narrowing. They're the first to break when things heat up. Ava met her father's gaze, her heart racing. Dad, what if they escalate before I'm ready? Commander Johnson's face hardened. His voice softened slightly, yet carried a weight. You protect yourself first. Strategy comes second. But from what you've seen, what's next? What do you think they'll do? Ava's mind raced, piecing together their patterns, their behaviors, and the growing threat. It wasn't just about the puddle anymore. This was about something deeper. They want me to quit, she said, her voice steady, but they'll make their next move impossible to ignore. It'll be something public, something humiliating. Then we start accelerating your training, he said, his tone fierce. Tomorrow, Phase 2 begins. Ava's brow furrowed, uncertain of what was coming next. What's Phase 2? Commander Johnson's smile grew, sharp and cold as steel. We turn their strengths into weaknesses. Phase 1 targets Ethan Carter, Commander Johnson explained as they sat across from each other at breakfast. He's the leader. Taking him down sends a message to the rest. How do we do that? Ava asked, her voice unwavering. Without a word, Commander Johnson slid a manila folder toward her. Inside, there were photocopies of prescription bottles and a small bag with white pills. Ava's heart skipped a beat as she looked at the pills. Where did you get these? She asked, alarm creeping into her voice. The nurse's office is poorly secured, Commander Johnson explained, his tone indifferent. These were supposed to be disposed of, expired anxiety medications. The bottles still have patient information, but I've made sure the names are obscured, he added calmly. Ava stared at the contents, the gravity of the plan sinking in. You want me to plant drugs in his truck? I want you to create a situation where Ethan Carter faces consequences, real consequences, for the first time in his privileged life. Commander Johnson's voice was resolute. College scouts don't recruit athletes with drug charges, Ava, he added. Ava stared at the pills, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. This could end Ethan's future in an instant, just like he was trying to end hers. The difference was she hadn't started this war. But what if? Ava began to ask, but her father's voice cut her off, gentle yet firm. They shoved you into that puddle, humiliated you in front of everyone, he said. They won't stop until you're gone. They need to understand that actions like this have a cost. Sometimes the only way to deal with a bully is to hit them where it hurts most. His voice was cold, calculating. Ava nodded slowly, a resolve forming within her. She tucked the folder into her backpack, the decision weighing heavily on her. Friday afternoon, Ava waited in the school parking lot, her body tense and alert as she positioned herself behind a van with a clear view of Ethan's challenger. Most students had already left, but football practice wouldn't start for another 30 minutes. Perfect timing. Ethan's black challenger sat alone, parked in the premium spots reserved for senior athletes, untouched. Ava had watched him for a week, learning his routine. He always left his truck unlocked when heading to the weight room before practice. Nobody would dare mess with it. She approached the truck, her movements casual, as if walking to her own car parked 3 rows away. When she was certain no one was watching, she swiftly opened the passenger door of the Challenger. Inside, the truck reeked of expensive cologne and the arrogance of its owner. Ava carefully slipped the prescription bottle under the passenger seat, positioning it just right so it would be visible, without being too obvious. She scattered the loose pills in the center console, mixing them with spare change and old receipts. Her hands trembled slightly as she closed the door, her pulse quickening as she walked away, trying to keep her composure. 2 hours later, during football practice, an anonymous tip was made to the school's drug hotline. The tipster reported suspicious activity around Ethan's truck and urged that someone investigate before the student drove under the influence. Principal Martinez and Deputy Collins approached Ethan during practice. "Carter, we need to search your vehicle," Deputy Collins declared. "What? Why?" Ethan's cocky confidence faltered, his eyes wide with panic for the first time since Ava had known him. An anonymous tip came in about drug activity. Probably nothing, but we have to follow through. Ethan's teammates started gathering around, intrigued by the sudden attention. Coach Reynolds jogged over from across the field, his presence commanding. "What's going on here?" Coach Reynolds called out. "Just a routine search," Deputy Collins responded. "It'll only take a few minutes, but it didn't take long at all." Deputy Collins found the prescription bottle almost immediately, and the loose pills scattered in the center console were enough to seal Ethan's fate. "Whose prescription is this?" Deputy Collins asked, lifting the bottle with its label obscured, but still revealing something damning. "I don't know. I've never seen that before in my life." Ethan's voice cracked with panic, his confident facade crumbling. "Are you telling me someone planted drugs in your unlocked truck?" "Yes, maybe." "I don't know how they got there," Ethan stammered, his mind racing to find an explanation. Principal Martinez sighed, his frustration evident. "Ethan, this is serious. These are controlled substances." "I'm not using drugs. Ask anyone. Test me right now." Ethan's voice rose, the desperation in his eyes undeniable. "That's not the issue. Possession is possession, regardless of whether you use them," Deputy Collins replied, his tone firm. Coach Reynolds stepped forward, his voice rising in defense. "Wait a second, Principal Martinez. Ethan's one of our star players. This has to be a mistake." "Coach, I have to follow protocol," Principal Martinez said calmly. "Ethan, I'm suspending you until we investigate. Deputy Collins will handle the legal details." The color drained from Ethan's face, his pride collapsing. "Suspended? But the playoffs are coming up. College scouts are coming to watch." "Should have thought about that before bringing these to school," Deputy Collins said as he bagged the evidence, his words cutting deep. "This is insane. Someone's framing me." Ethan's voice was almost pleading now. "Who would do that?" Principal Martinez asked, his brow furrowing in confusion. Ethan's eyes darted nervously, scanning the faces around him, his teammates, coaches, school officials. For the first time, he looked genuinely terrified. "I don't know, but this isn't mine." Ethan's voice cracked with desperation. From the bleachers, Ava stretched with the cheer squad, her eyes locked on the unfolding drama below. Madison leaned in, her voice hushed. "What do you think is going on?" "Looks like Ethan's in trouble," Ava said calmly, keeping her tone neutral despite the chaos unfolding. "Sounds like drug trouble, from what I'm hearing." "That's crazy. Ethan doesn't seem like the type." Madison's voice was filled with disbelief. "You never really know people," Ava replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Across the field, Ava watched as Ethan was led away from practice in handcuffs, his once proud demeanor shattered. Tyler Knox and Dylan Mitchell stood frozen, staring in stunned silence as their leader was loaded into the back of a police cruiser. "This is messed up," Tyler muttered under his breath, his fists clenching at his sides. "Ethan doesn't do that kind of thing," Dylan added nervously, trying to maintain some form of denial. "Maybe someone really did plant them," Dylan said, his voice shaky, trying to convince himself. "Who would do that?" Dylan muttered, his eyes catching Ava on the sidelines. She was focused, going through the motions with the cheer squad, her back to the escalating drama. "I don't know," he said, his voice trailing off, a realization dawning on him. "But Ethan's made a lot of enemies lately." That evening, the local news broke the story. Star quarterback Ethan Carter arrested on possession charges. Within hours, Ethan's father hired a high-priced lawyer, but the damage had already been done. State University pulled their recruitment offer that same night, and by the next morning, Alabama followed suit. Back at the Johnson house, Ava and her father sat down to dinner, watching the news unfold. Phase 1 complete, Commander Johnson said softly, his eyes fixed on the screen. I should feel good about this, Ava said, pushing her food around her plate absent-mindedly. But I just feel empty. That's normal, her father replied. Justice doesn't always feel satisfying right away. But think about this. How many students won't be bullied because Ethan Carter learned there are consequences for his actions? Ava nodded slowly, her thoughts drifting to all the kids who might never experience the kind of humiliation she had. What's phase 2? Tyler Knox. And this time, we're going to let him dig his own grave. Ethan's arrest hit Westfield High like a bombshell. By Monday, the entire school knew that the star quarterback was in deep trouble, facing serious charges and losing his college scholarships. The football team was in a state of shock, and Tyler Knox had swiftly filled the leadership vacuum, his fury barely contained. This is insane, Tyler yelled during lunch, his voice cutting through the cafeteria, loud enough for everyone to hear. Ethan doesn't do that stuff. Someone set him up. His girlfriend Ashley comforted him, rubbing his shoulder as she tried to calm him down. Maybe the charges won't stick. Maybe he'll get his scholarships back, Ashley said, though the uncertainty in her voice was clear. No way. Colleges won't touch players with drug records, Tyler snapped, his anger bubbling over. Tyler's fist tightened around his sandwich, his frustration mounting. Someone ruined his life, and I'm going to find out who did it, Tyler muttered under his breath. Ava sat quietly at her usual table, her ears sharp, listening to every word of their conversation. She could feel Tyler's eyes searching the room, scanning for anyone he could blame. That afternoon, Commander Johnson sat down with Ava, reviewing the intelligence he had gathered on Tyler Knox. He noted that Tyler's family was struggling financially. Tyler needs that scholarship, or he'll be stuck with community college and student loans, Commander Johnson continued, his voice steady. So, we target his scholarship chances, Commander Johnson said, his voice cold as he thought about the next step. Her father nodded gravely. But Tyler's different from Ethan. He's not entitled, he's desperate, and desperate people are dangerous. What do you mean? Ava asked, her voice uncertain. I mean, Tyler's the type to escalate to violence when pushed, her father explained, his tone now serious. We need to tread carefully with him, Commander Johnson added, his eyes narrowing. He pulled out a small vaping device and several tiny bags of nicotine pods, each one a piece of evidence that could expose Tyler. Your intelligence work paid off. Tyler's been selling vapes to underclassmen behind the gym, her father said, his voice firm. Ava stared at the evidence in disbelief, the reality of what Tyler was doing sinking in. How did you find this? Ava asked, a mix of shock and concern in her voice. I followed him yesterday after school. I saw him sell 3 vapes to freshmen, $50 each for devices that cost him $20 online, her father replied, his face expressionless. So, he's already breaking the law, Ava whispered, feeling a sense of betrayal. Exactly. We don't need to plan anything. We just need to make sure the right people find out what he's already doing, her father continued, his plan starting to form. Ava felt a pang of guilt. Dad, what if this ruins his whole future? His family depends on that scholarship money, Ava said, the weight of the decision pulling at her. Commander Johnson's face hardened. Ava, this is the toughest part of any operation, questioning if your actions are justified. But don't forget what Tyler did to you. Don't forget how he laughed when you were thrown in the mud. I know, but... Ava hesitated. And remember, he's been selling nicotine to 14-year-olds for his own profit, her father added, his tone unwavering. Tyler Knox made his choices long before we got involved, her father said, his eyes steady on her. That evening, Ava wrestled with the moral dilemma. She thought about Tyler's desperation, his family's financial struggles, the look in his eyes when Ethan had been arrested. But then she remembered his hands gripping her arms, his words echoing in her head. You people? The sound of his laughter as she sat helpless in that mud puddle. By Tuesday afternoon, Ava had made her choice. At Tyler's usual selling spot behind the gym, Ava positioned herself in the nearby art building, her phone camera at the ready. Ava watched Tyler complete 2 transactions, exchanging money for vapes with freshmen. She recorded every detail. She documented everything. By Wednesday morning, Ava had anonymously submitted the video along with screenshots of Tyler's Venmo transactions to Principal Martinez. The confrontation came during third period chemistry. Principal Martinez and Deputy Collins pulled Tyler from class, and 20 minutes later they were digging through his locker. Inside, they found 12 vapes, small bags of nicotine pods, and almost $300 in cash, wrapped tightly in a rubber band. Tyler's protest rang out in the hallway, but no one was listening. This is a setup, Ethan spat. Someone's trying to tear us apart, Tyler growled, eyes narrowing. Mr. Knox, we have evidence of you selling illegal substances to minors, Principal Martinez stated firmly, his voice cold. This isn't a setup. This is accountability, Principal Martinez snapped back. You don't understand. My family needs this. You should have made better choices. Tyler's voice cracked with desperation. You're suspended pending an expulsion hearing. The police will handle the criminal charges, Principal Martinez said, his voice steady. By the time lunch rolled around, the entire school knew. Tyler Knox, the once prized linebacker, was now facing criminal charges, and college scouts were no longer calling. Later, Ashley caught up with Ava at her locker, her face tight with concern. Did you hear about Tyler? Ashley asked, her voice soft. Yeah, it's everywhere, Ava replied, trying to stay neutral. Shocking, right? He's claiming someone set him up. He thinks someone's going after the football team, Ashley said, a hint of doubt in her voice. Ashley's eyes bore into Ava, scrutinizing every detail. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Ava held her gaze unwavering. Why would I know about Tyler's illegal business? Ava asked coolly. It's just strange, the timing, Ashley said, her tone laced with suspicion. Maybe they're not as perfect as they think, Ava said quietly. Ashley's face darkened, a frown creasing her brow. Tyler's going to lose everything over this, Ashley muttered bitterly. Ava felt the weight of those words, a sharp pang in her chest. The thought of Tyler's desperation, his family's struggle, made Ava second-guess herself for a moment. That's really sad, Ava whispered, her voice soft, conflicted. But Tyler made his own choices, Ava said more firmly. As Ashley turned and walked away, Ava felt the crushing weight of the choices she had made. Justice, as her father had told her, wasn't always gratifying in the moment. Sometimes it felt like a burden too great to bear. But one more target remained, and Dylan Mitchell was beginning to unravel, his nerves fraying with every passing day. With Ethan expelled and Tyler facing charges, Dylan was on the verge of snapping. That Tuesday evening, Dylan made the calls that would alter everything. We need to meet, all 3 of us, he told Ethan, his voice tight with urgency. I figured out who's been doing this to us, Dylan said, eyes glinting with realization. Doing what? Ethan's voice was bitter, full of frustration and bitterness. Come on, Ethan. You really think it's a coincidence that all this happened right after we messed with that black cheerleader? Silence echoed on the other end of the line. You think she's the one behind this? Ethan asked, disbelief in his voice. I know she is. Think about it. First, you get arrested for drugs right after we shoved her in that mud puddle. Then Tyler gets caught selling vapes. Someone's been gathering evidence on us, Dylan said, his voice low with anger. That's impossible. She's just some girl, Ethan scoffed. Is she? Have you ever noticed how she just takes everything we throw at her? Like she's planning something? Dylan's voice was full of suspicion. Like she's planning something? Ethan echoed, a sneer forming on his lips. Another long silence followed, tension thickening the air. Meet me at Tyler's in an hour. We need to figure this out. I'll find a way to get there without my parents finding out. An hour later, the 3 boys sat in Tyler's garage, the usual swagger replaced by a growing sense of fear and anger. This is crazy, Tyler muttered after Dylan laid out his theory. So you're saying some cheerleader planned all this? Ethan asked, incredulous. I'm saying someone is behind this, and she's the only one who stands to gain, Dylan said, his eyes hardening. She thinks she can just destroy us and walk away unscathed, Ethan sneered, clenching his fists. Time to show her that every action has consequences, Ethan hissed. Ethan grabbed his phone, his fingers trembling with rage. First, we need to know where she lives. We can't corner her at school. Too many eyes. Too many cameras. Too many witnesses at school, Tyler agreed, a trace of fear in his voice. How do we even find that out? Dylan asked, his tone hesitant. Easy. The school directory has emergency contact info, Ethan said, a cold glint in his eye. Tyler clicked open his laptop, determined. My mom still has access to the PTA portal, Tyler added, eyes fixed on the screen. Got it. 1247 Maple Street, Ethan confirmed after a few minutes of scrolling. 1247 Maple Street. Quiet, isolated, about 15 minutes away. Ethan mused, studying the address. Perfect, Ethan grinned, studying the house on Google Street View. Looks like a normal suburban house. No cameras, he continued, nodding to himself. Just isolated enough, he said, a dangerous edge in his voice. Ethan stood up, his fists tightly clenched, his body tensing with anger. Tonight, it ends tonight, Ethan said coldly. She thinks she can ruin us and just walk away. Not this time, he spat. Time to show her that there are real consequences, he hissed. What if she calls the cops? Dylan asked, his voice trembling now. She won't get the chance, Ethan replied, his eyes burning with resolve. We get in, get the answers, make our point, and get out. Quick and clean, Ethan ordered. We get what we need, make sure she understands, and leave, Ethan said, his voice low and menacing. What if her parents wake up? Tyler asked, his voice uncertain. Then we improvise, Ethan said, his jaw tightening. But one way or another, this ends tonight, Ethan said firmly. The boys spent the next hour planning, desperation and fear sharpening their resolve. Their minds worked like cornered animals, frantic but focused. Remember, Ethan said, locking eyes with each of them, we're not here to hurt her. We're here to get the truth and make her understand the price of crossing us, Ethan repeated. Right, Tyler muttered, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Just a conversation, a serious one, Dylan added, though his voice lacked conviction. Dylan nodded, his mind racing, trying to convince himself they weren't about to make a mistake they'd regret. Ava had made evening walks a habit, an escape, a way to clear her head after everything that had been happening. Her father had advised her to keep up with normal activities, saying it was vital for her mental health, especially given the stressful circumstances. On Wednesday evening, Ava headed out on her regular walk at 8:30, the streets empty and quiet around her. The sun had long set, and the neighborhood was peaceful, most families already inside for the night. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows while the faint hum of TVs and the occasional car passing were the only sounds. 3 blocks from home, as she passed Riverside Park, Ava heard the engine of a car slow down behind her. Instincts from her training kicked in immediately. Without turning, Ava used the reflection in a parked car's window to assess the vehicle behind her. A dark truck was creeping along the curb, matching her stride. Her father's voice echoed in her head. When you're being followed, don't let them dictate the terms of the confrontation. The park was too secluded, too easy for them to corner her. Better to stay on the street where help might be close by. Ava quickened her pace, heading toward the intersection, hoping for a safer route home. The sound of truck doors slamming shut behind her made her heart race. Hey, Ava! Ava instantly recognized Ethan's voice. Her heart pounded, but she stayed calm, pulling out her phone to call her father. Don't even think about it, Tyler's voice cut in, low and threatening. Tyler had circled around, appearing suddenly on her right, blocking her way to the intersection. Dylan stepped out from behind a parked car, closing off her path entirely. They had planned this trap carefully. We need to talk. Ethan's voice was cold as he stepped closer from behind. And this time, Daddy's not here to save you, Ethan said, his voice dripping with venom. Ava halted and turned to face them, keeping her eyes on all 3 of the boys. The nearest house was 50 yards away, and the porch light was off, leaving her exposed. No one else around. Ava's voice remained firm, though her pulse raced as adrenaline surged through her body. "What do you want?" "We need answers," Ethan snapped, taking another step toward her. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Ava countered, her eyes unwavering. "Stop lying," Tyler growled, his face red with anger, the words seething between clenched teeth. "First, Ethan gets arrested for drugs right after we put you in your place. Then I get caught selling vapes. You think we're stupid?" Tyler's voice was sharp, mocking, as if Ava were beneath him. "I think you got yourselves caught and now you need someone to blame," Ava said, her voice steady, cutting through the tension. Dylan's voice trembled with a mix of fear and frustration. "You destroyed our lives. Ethan lost his scholarships. Tyler's facing charges. What did we ever do to deserve this?" "Actions have consequences," Ava responded calmly, her resolve firming with each word. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you laid your hands on me." Ava's voice hardened. Her words struck like a slap in the face. Ethan's face darkened with the realization of what she meant. "So you admit it. You've been planning all of this," Ethan said, narrowing his eyes. "I admit that bullies always face justice eventually," Ava said, her calm voice holding a quiet, deadly edge. Tyler moved forward, his fists tight with fury, the air around him crackling with anger. "Justice?" Tyler spat, his voice thick with contempt. "You think ruining our futures is justice for some stupid prank?" "Stupid prank." Ava's calm exterior faltered for just a moment, her eyes flashing with a spark of rage. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. You ripped my uniform. You made me feel small, powerless, and afraid." "Good," Ethan sneered, a cruel smile twisting his face. "Maybe now you understand how it feels," Ethan taunted. "The difference is, you chose to be bullies. I chose to fight back," Ava said, her voice steady but fierce. "Congratulations," Tyler said mockingly. "You won. We're all screwed now." "Happy?" Tyler asked with a bitter laugh. "Not yet," Ava replied, her eyes cold and calculating, a challenge hanging in her voice. Ethan's eyes narrowed with dangerous intent. "What else do you want from us?" Ethan sneered, his voice low. "I want you to understand something. There are people in this world you can't intimidate. People who refuse to be victims just because you think they should be." Dylan stepped forward, desperation painting his face. "We get it," Dylan said, his voice cracking. "You're tough. You're smart. You beat us. Can we call it even?" "Even?" Ava's voice rose with the weight of her disbelief. "You think this is even?" Ava's voice was steady but cold. "You three against one girl, cornering me like cowards in the dark." "We're not cowards," Tyler shouted, launching himself at her. Ava was prepared. With quick precision, Ava sidestepped Tyler's charge, striking his ribs with her elbow. Tyler stumbled back, gasping for air, and Ava immediately pivoted, her eyes locking onto Ethan, who was charging from behind. Her father's lessons surged through her, her body reacting instinctively. "Strike fast, strike hard, create distance," she repeated in her mind. Ethan lunged, but Ava ducked under his arms and landed a sharp punch to his solar plexus. As Ethan doubled over, Ava's knee aimed for his face, but he twisted away at the last moment. Dylan tried to tackle her from the side, but Ava spun around and used his momentum to flip him over her hip. He crashed to the asphalt with a painful grunt. Tyler recovered quickly and charged at her again, but this time with more caution. Tyler was bigger and stronger, but Ava was quicker, more calculated, and better trained. Ava feinted left, then struck right, her palm crashing into Tyler's nose with a sickening crack. Blood spurted as Tyler staggered back, his hands clutching his nose. Ethan, winded but seething with fury, pulled a knife from his pocket. "Enough games," Ethan snarled. "You want to play war? Let's play war," he hissed as the blade gleamed under the streetlight. The cold gleam of the blade under the streetlight sent a chill down Ava's spine as Ethan advanced. Ava's mind cleared, focused, calm in the chaos. Every lesson her father had instilled in her about weapon defense flooded her mind. "Ethan, don't!" Dylan shouted, still sprawled on the pavement, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and disbelief. "This is insane!" But Ethan was past the point of reason, fueled by desperation and blind rage. He lunged, the blade flashing as he aimed for her midsection. Ava reacted instantly, grabbing his wrist with both hands, twisting it, using his own momentum to redirect the blade away from her. With a quick twist, she applied pressure to his thumb joint, and with a sharp, desperate cry, Ethan dropped the knife. Before Ethan could regain control, Ava's knee slammed into his stomach, and an uppercut followed, snapping his head back with brutal precision. Ethan crumpled to the ground, semi-conscious, blood seeping from the cut on his face. 3 opponents, 3 of them, defeated in under 30 seconds. Ava stood over them, her breath coming fast, the weight of the fight settling in, though no one would hear it. They had cornered her, armed with a knife, believing they could intimidate her, and yet she had beaten all of them. Far off, the sound of sirens wailed, drawing closer. Someone had called the cops. Now the consequences were coming for everyone. The first cruiser screeched into view, lights flashing, cutting through the night. Officer Martinez stepped out, her hand instinctively resting on her weapon as her eyes scanned the chaotic scene. 3 boys lay injured on the ground in varying states of pain, while Ava stood a few feet away, unmoving, the knife glinting in the dim light. "Nobody move," she commanded, her voice stern, unwavering. "Hands where I can see them." Ava raised her hands slowly, her voice calm yet resolute. "Officer, my name is Ava Johnson. These boys cornered me. One pulled a knife. I defended myself." Tyler, struggling to sit up, blood dripping from his broken nose, spat the words, "She attacked us. We were just trying to talk to her." "With a knife?" Officer Martinez asked, her gaze fixed on the weapon near Ethan, now unconscious. "That's not our," Dylan protested, pushing himself to his feet, grimacing from pain. "She must have planted it." A second cruiser rolled in, the flashing lights joining the chaos, quickly followed by an ambulance. Deputy Collins, Officer Martinez's partner, began securing the scene, while paramedics rushed to Ethan, who was groggy, coming to consciousness. "I need to call my father," Ava said, her voice calm but sharp with resolve. "You're not calling anyone until we sort this out," Officer Martinez replied firmly. "What happened here?" "They followed me from my house, cornered me. They threatened my family earlier this week, and tonight, they came to make good on those threats." "That's a lie!" Tyler spat blood onto the concrete, his words thick with fury. "She's been setting us up for weeks," Tyler yelled. "She got Ethan arrested, got me busted for selling vapes, and now she's trying to frame us for assault." Deputy Collins, still photographing the weapon, looked up, his gaze narrowing. "This matches the description of a blade stolen from Carter's garage last week," Deputy Collins muttered, his voice grim. "Family reported it missing." Ethan's eyes went wide, panic overtaking his features as he sat up against the ambulance bumper. "I didn't steal anything." Ethan's voice cracked, the desperation bleeding through. "Someone's been planning this." At that exact moment, Commander Johnson's truck rumbled around the corner, his keen instincts alert from years of training. He'd heard his daughter's name in the dispatch. He parked with practiced precision, his military presence commanding attention as he approached the scene. "Sir, this is a crime scene," Officer Martinez warned, her tone professional. "That's my daughter," he replied, his voice firm and unwavering as he flashed his ID. "Commander David Johnson, retired Navy SEAL." "What's her status?" he asked, his eyes scanning the scene. "She appears uninjured, claims she was attacked by these 3 boys." Commander Johnson's sharp gaze took in the scene. 3 larger boys down, his daughter standing coolly, the knife clearly not her own. Pride and concern warred on his face as he studied his daughter. "Ava, are you hurt?" "No, Dad, I'm fine." Ava nodded. "Did you follow protocol?" "Yes, sir. I tried to avoid confrontation, called for help when I couldn't, and used only the minimum necessary force when cornered." Officer Martinez raised an eyebrow. "Protocol? What kind of protocol?" "Self-defense training," Commander Johnson said simply. "I've been teaching my daughter protection techniques ever since these boys started harassing her." "Harassing her? How?" Before Ava could respond, Tyler exploded, his voice breaking through the tension like a whip. "This is insane," Ethan spat, his voice cracking with frustration. "She's been ruining our lives." Ethan lost his scholarships because of her, Tyler added, fists clenching at his sides. Because he brought drugs to school, Ava replied calmly, her voice unwavering despite the chaos. Drugs you planted, Ava's words hung in the air, unshakable and sharp. Prove it, Ethan sneered, his desperation evident as his eyes darted around. Deputy Collins moved in, his voice unwavering. We'll need everyone to come down to the station for statements. This is a complex situation with multiple allegations, he added, his eyes flicking to the others. My daughter won't be answering questions without a lawyer present, Commander Johnson declared, his tone cold and authoritative. Dad, it's okay, Ava said softly, her tone steady as she met her father's gaze. I have nothing to hide. Ethan struggled to his feet, blood dripping from his forehead, his expression twisted with disbelief. You hear that? Ethan sneered, still trembling. She has nothing to hide because she planned everything perfectly? Planned what exactly? Officer Martinez asked, her eyes narrowing. Getting revenge for putting her in her place at school? The words hung in the air like a confession, too heavy to ignore. Commander Johnson's expression darkened, his voice icy. So you admit to targeting my daughter at school? Dylan, realizing the trap Ethan had set, scrambled to save face. It wasn't like that, Dylan muttered weakly, his voice cracking. It was just normal high school stuff. Normal? Ava's voice hardened, an edge of fury creeping in for the first time. Shoving me into a mud puddle, tearing my uniform in front of everyone. Was that normal? You didn't belong on our team, Tyler shouted, venom in his voice. You never belonged at our school. Officer Martinez and her partner exchanged a glance that said everything. This was bigger than it seemed. The racial undertones of the boys' words were impossible to overlook now. I think we need to have some very serious conversations downtown, Officer Martinez said sharply, the weight of the situation settling in. Harassment, assault with a deadly weapon, and civil rights violations. Civil rights? Dylan's voice cracked with panic, realizing the depth of what he was entangled in. Targeting someone because of their race is a federal crime, Officer Martinez said, her voice steely. And from what I'm hearing, that's exactly what happened here. The boys exchanged terrified looks, the weight of the legal consequences dawning on them. What had begun as petty bullying over a cheer squad spot was now spiraling into a federal hate crime investigation. Commander Johnson stepped forward, placing a firm protective hand on Ava's shoulder. Officer Martinez, Commander Johnson said, his voice unwavering. My daughter has been documenting harassment for weeks. We have evidence of escalating threats and racial targeting. Tonight was the inevitable culmination, he continued, eyes sharp with resolve. We'll need to see that evidence, Officer Martinez confirmed and nodding. You'll have it within the hour, Commander Johnson replied firmly. As the boys were loaded into separate police cars, Ava let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The confrontation was over, but Ava knew the real battle for justice was only just beginning. In the weeks following the arrest, Ava's life changed in ways she hadn't imagined. What began as a personal fight for dignity evolved into a national conversation about bullying, racial harassment, and the fight for justice in American schools. The first shift came when the FBI launched a federal hate crime investigation. 3 days after the attack, Agent Emma Wilson arrived at the Johnson house. Her badge and serious demeanor made the stakes clear. The knife attack was just the culmination of everything that had been building. Agent Wilson explained to Ava and her father in the living room, "We've been building a case on the systematic racial harassment. This goes beyond assault," she continued. "It's a federal civil rights violation." Commander Johnson nodded, his face hardening with the weight of the case. "What do you need from us?" Commander Johnson asked, his voice steady. "Everything. Every text message, every social media post, every witness statement," Agent Wilson replied, her tone unwavering. "We're going to build an airtight case that sends a message." Meanwhile, the three boys' families scrambled to manage the fallout from their children's actions. Ethan's father hired Harrison Wells, the state's most expensive criminal defense lawyer, for a staggering $50,000. Tyler's family mortgaged their house to afford a lawyer, desperate to save his future. Dylan's mother worked extra shifts, scraping together enough for a public defender. The media's attention began with a local news report, but it exploded when the video of the fight surfaced. A Ring doorbell camera had captured the entire brutal confrontation. Three large boys cornering a single girl, Ethan pulling a knife, and Ava, calm but fierce, systematically taking them down one by one. "Teen girl fights off racist attackers," screamed the national headlines, the footage running on loop across every news station. Cable news stations played the footage over and over again, each rerun fueling the outrage. Social media exploded in support of Ava, while simultaneously condemning the boys' actions as not just bullying, but a deep-seated form of hate. 2 weeks after the arrest, CNN's Anderson Cooper sat in the Johnson living room, the cameras rolling, his voice full of empathy and curiosity. "Ava, when those three boys cornered you that night, what was going through your mind?" Anderson Cooper asked, his voice serious, intent on understanding the gravity of her experience. "That this was what my father had been preparing me for," Ava responded calmly, her voice unwavering despite the raw emotions swirling beneath her words. "Not the fight itself, but the moment when I had to choose between being a victim or standing up for myself," Ava added, the weight of those words reverberating in the room. "Commander Johnson, you taught your daughter to fight. Do you have any regrets about that?" Cooper asked, his voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and concern. David Johnson's expression hardened like steel. "My only regret is that it was necessary, but I'd rather have a daughter who can defend herself than one who suffers in silence." The interview drew 20 million viewers, igniting national debates about self-defense, parental responsibility, and the pervasive issue of systemic racism in schools. Back in Westfield, the community split into two camps: those who supported Ava's bravery and those who sympathized with the boys, minimizing their actions as youthful mistakes. Many residents rallied behind Ava, applauding her courage, but others insisted the boys were being unfairly prosecuted, claiming it was just typical teenage behavior gone too far. The school district, already reeling, found itself under a federal investigation that scrutinized every inch of how the harassment had been handled. Principal Martinez was placed on administrative leave as authorities began reviewing how the harassment had been mishandled and swept under the rug for far too long. Coach Reynolds was immediately fired when investigators revealed he'd known about the boys' behavior and failed to intervene. 3 months into the legal process, the pressure mounted as plea negotiations began in earnest, the weight of evidence and public opinion impossible to ignore. The evidence was overwhelming: text messages planning the attack, social media posts filled with racial slurs, witness testimonies detailing months of harassment, and the incriminating footage from the Ring camera that captured everything. Ethan Carter's attorney, Harrison Wells, sat across from DA Rebecca Chen on a rainy Tuesday morning, trying to negotiate a way out of the mess his client had created. "My client is willing to plead to simple assault," Wells offered, his voice hesitant, as if he knew the stakes were too high to backpedal now. "No hate crime charges. He serves 18 months, and we can make this all go away quietly," he proposed, hoping for a break. DeChen laughed coldly, her gaze unwavering. "Your client brought a knife to attack a 16-year-old girl because of her race. We have him on video. The plea is assault with a deadly weapon, conspiracy, and federal hate crime violations. 4 years minimum," she added, her voice firm as she pressed her case. "That's his entire future," she emphasized, the weight of the statement hanging in the air. "He should have considered that before he decided to terrorize a child," she finished, her words a sharp reminder of the choices made. Wells tried a different angle, voice shaky. "What if he makes a public apology, shows remorse?" "Has he shown remorse?" DeChen shot back, her tone incredulous. Wells fell silent, a realization dawning. "He's struggling with the situation," Wells finally said, voice trailing off. "Agent Wilson intercepted his jailhouse calls yesterday. He called Miss Johnson the N-word 6 times and promised to finish the job when he gets out," she said, her voice unyielding. "Does that sound like remorse to you?" she demanded, her eyes cold as she watched Wells crumble. Wells' face dropped as he realized his client's case had just slipped beyond saving. Similar conversations played out with Tyler and Dylan's lawyers, the weight of evidence suffocating their chances of defense. Tyler's communications were filled with violent fantasies about revenge, the depth of his rage unmistakable. Only Dylan, the weakest link, showed any true remorse, writing heartfelt letters of apology and participating in racial sensitivity counseling. The pressure from the community intensified, with every passing day feeling like an eternity as the trial date neared. Westfield High's football program was suspended for the season, the community in shock over the fallout. The school board was forced into emergency meetings, trying to salvage what was left of their reputation by introducing anti-harassment policies. Property values plummeted as families began pulling their children out of the district, too ashamed to stay amidst the scandal. As a hospital worker, Dylan's mother was bombarded with whispered judgments and cold stares from colleagues, each question she faced like a silent condemnation. Several of Dylan's extended family severed ties, their shame palpable as they distanced themselves from the scandal that had shattered their image. The boys were isolated, held in separate facilities to ensure their stories couldn't be coordinated, their fate now beyond their control. Ethan, incarcerated in the adult lockup due to the weapon charge, quickly earned a notorious reputation, his racist outbursts and violent temper making him a target even among hardened criminals. Tyler, placed in juvenile detention, was forced into protective custody after several violent altercations with inmates who recognized him from the news coverage. Dylan, still in juvenile detention, sought redemption through counseling programs and wrote countless letters of apology, his lawyer clinging to them as his last hope to sway the court. 6 months after the attack, the relentless media spotlight turned Ava into a symbol, offering her documentary deals, book contracts, and countless speaking engagements. But Ava rejected it all, choosing instead to focus on her studies and the student body presidency she had won in a landslide, solidifying her leadership in the face of adversity. By February, the plea agreements were settled. Ethan, in a last-ditch effort to salvage his future, would plead guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence of 4 years. Tyler, the enforcer, would serve 3 years for his role. Dylan, showing genuine remorse, would receive 18 months in juvenile detention, a reflection of his cooperation with authorities. The final court session took place on a biting March morning, the air thick with tension and anticipation. Outside, the courthouse was a battlefield of emotions, protesters chanting for justice for Ava, while others defended the boys, claiming their punishment was too harsh. Media trucks filled the streets, their cameras trained on the courthouse as the case became a national spectacle. Inside, Judge Patricia Reynolds sat at the bench, her eyes scanning the case file for the final time before the packed courtroom of onlookers. With 30 years of experience, Judge Reynolds had handled cases ranging from white-collar fraud to murder, but nothing had prepared her for the immense public scrutiny this case had drawn. We are here today for the sentencing of defendants Carter, Knox, and Mitchell, who have pled guilty to charges of assault, conspiracy, and federal hate crime violations, she declared, the weight of her words filling the room. Ava sat beside her attorney, DHN, wearing a modest blue dress her mother had carefully picked out for the occasion, her posture strong and unyielding. Behind her, Commander Johnson stood tall, his military bearing unshaken as he was flanked by loyal supporters from the school and community. Madison Clark and several other cheerleaders had driven for hours to stand by Ava, showing their unwavering support. Across the aisle, the 3 boys sat with their attorneys, their families behind them, each one trying to look strong, but their faces betraying the weight of what was to come. Ethan's parents sat slumped, their faces etched with the deep lines of stress and public humiliation. Tyler's family looked worn out, emotionally drained and financially ravaged by the fallout. Dylan's mother wept silently, her heart broken as she realized she had already lost her son to the justice system. DHN rose with quiet strength, ready to deliver the closing argument that would seal the boys' fates. "Your Honor," DHN began, her voice firm, "this case represents far more than teenage bullying gone wrong. The defendants waged a systematic campaign of racial harassment, culminating in a premeditated assault with a deadly weapon. The evidence paints a clear picture: months of planning, coordination, and escalating violence fueled by hatred." She opened a thick file, each page holding the weight of their transgressions. The text messages between the defendants refer to Miss Johnson using racial slurs and discuss various ways to get rid of her, DHN said, the words hanging in the air like a confession. Social media posts show them encouraging others to join in the harassment. Witness testimonies confirm they made her life unbearable for months before the final violent attack. These were no longer just angry teenagers who made poor choices. These were young men who had lost everything: college scholarships, their futures, their reputations, all destroyed by their own actions. But had they truly learned their lesson? Have they? DHN shot back, pulling out a set of transcripts. We intercepted jailhouse communications where Mr. Carter referred to the victim using racial slurs and vowed to finish what was started once he got out. Mr. Knox has made similar comments about getting revenge, she continued, her voice steady as the courtroom filled with murmurs of disgust. Ethan's father, unable to meet anyone's gaze, slumped in his chair, realizing that his son had just sealed his fate. Judge Reynolds scanned the documents with growing dismay before looking up at the defendant. "Mr. Carter, stand up." Ethan stood shakily, his orange jumpsuit a jarring contrast to the expensive varsity jacket he had once worn with pride. "In my 30 years on this bench," Judge Reynolds began, her voice steely, "I've seen many young people make mistakes and grow from them. But what you and your co-defendants did goes far beyond youthful mistakes. You targeted a fellow student because of her race, escalated that harassment for months, and ultimately attacked her with a deadly weapon, making threats against her family in the process." Wells tried to interject, but Judge Reynolds' voice cut through like a blade. "You may not. Mr. Carter," she said, her gaze unwavering, "you were the ringleader of this conspiracy. You planned the attack, brought the weapon, and led the assault. Your recent communications show no remorse, only continued racial hatred and threats of violence." Ethan's legs seemed to buckle beneath him as he pleaded, "Please, Your Honor, I made a mistake. Multiple mistakes over months. With calculated malicious intent and clear racial animus," Judge Reynolds said, "I have no choice but to follow the sentencing guidelines. I sentence you to 4 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation with mandatory racial sensitivity counseling. You are permanently banned from all Westfield School District properties and prohibited from contacting the victim or her family." Ethan's mother broke down into sobs behind him, while his father sat in grim silence, staring ahead, his face blank with disbelief at the utter destruction of his son's future and the family's reputation. "Mr. Knox, stand up." Tyler stood, his hands shaking uncontrollably. His family couldn't afford the high-powered defense Ethan's family had secured. His public defender looked visibly overwhelmed by the weight of the federal case. "You were an active participant in this conspiracy. Your communications show you encouraged violence, used racial slurs repeatedly, and physically participated in the assault. 3 years in state prison, 2 years probation, with the same counseling requirements and restrictions on contact with the victim." Tyler's knees wavered as the reality of his fate sank in. His girlfriend Ashley, who had supported him through it all, had broken up with him months ago after the jailhouse recordings became public. "Mr. Mitchell," Judge Reynolds said, her voice firm but not unkind. Dylan struggled to remain upright, his face pale and streaked with tears. Unlike his co-defendants, Dylan has spent months showing genuine remorse, writing letters of apology, participating in counseling, and cooperating fully with investigators. You were the follower in this group, but you still participated willingly in racial harassment and assault. However, your cooperation, participation in counseling, and remorse distinguish your case from the others. 18 months in juvenile detention, followed by 2 years of probation, and 500 hours of community service with racial justice organizations. Dylan's mother broke down in tears of relief. 18 months was a harsh sentence, but it was nothing compared to the years-long punishment she had feared. Judge Reynolds turned to face the crowded courtroom. "Let this case stand as a warning," she said, her voice strong, "to every parent, school administrator, and young person watching. Hate crimes will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law within this jurisdiction. The futures of the defendants were destroyed, not by their victims' response, but by their own decisions to engage in racial violence." She locked eyes with Ava. "Miss Johnson, would you like to make a victim impact statement?" Ava stood, her body brimming with strength, the weight of the room's gaze pressing down on her. The girl who had once been shoved into a mud puddle 8 months ago was no more. In her place stood a young woman who had faced hate and emerged resilient. "I didn't ask for any of this," Ava began, her voice steady, cutting through the tense silence of the courtroom. "I just wanted to make the cheer team, get good grades, and have a normal high school experience. But these defendants took that choice from me when they decided I didn't belong in their world." Ava turned to the 3 boys, meeting their eyes with unwavering defiance. "You thought you could scare me into leaving? You thought your violence and threats would force me to quit and leave school? Instead, you taught me that standing up to bullies is the only way to stop them from hurting others." Her voice rose in strength. "I hope prison teaches you what empathy and decency could not. I hope you understand that every person deserves respect, no matter their race. And I hope that when you are released, you spend the rest of your lives undoing the damage and hatred you've spread." Ethan's eyes burned with fury. His expression hardened, showing no remorse. Tyler stared at the ground, clearly ashamed. Dylan, on the other hand, appeared crushed by the weight of his actions, a look of genuine regret on his face. "This court is adjourned." As the gavel struck, the courtroom erupted in controlled chaos. Reporters scrambled toward the exits, eager to file their stories. The 3 defendants were led away in handcuffs, their families trailing behind, each of them caught in varying degrees of grief, anger, and devastation. Outside the courthouse, Ava and her father stood on the steps, their faces caught in the flashing lights of cameras as reporters shouted questions. "Miss Johnson, how do you feel about the sentences?" a CNN correspondent called out. Ava answered, her voice clear and confident. "I feel like justice was served. These boys learned that actions have consequences, no matter who your family is, how much money you have, or what you think you're entitled to." "What message do you have for other students facing harassment?" the reporter asked. "Document everything, tell trusted adults, and remember, you have the right to defend yourself and demand justice." Commander Johnson placed a protective arm around his daughter's shoulders as they prepared to leave the courthouse. "I'm proud of her for standing up for herself and for every student who will never have to face what she did, thanks to her courage," Commander Johnson said, his voice thick with emotion. As they walked toward their car through the sea of reporters and supporters, Ava felt a burden lift from her shoulders, a burden she had carried for nearly a year. The fight was finally over, and justice had prevailed. But the true victory wasn't the prison's sentences or the courtroom's vindication. It was the knowledge that, in the face of hate and violence, she had responded with courage, intelligence, and determination, and emerged victorious. A year later, Ava Johnson stood at the podium of Westfield High's newly renovated auditorium, her voice commanding the attention of the packed room as she spoke about anti-bullying and racial justice. She couldn't help but feel the irony of the moment, standing in the same school where 3 boys had once tried to break her spirit just because of the color of her skin. "A year ago, I thought my biggest challenge would be mastering cheer routines," she began, her voice strong and clear, resonating through the packed auditorium. "I never imagined I'd have to fight just to exist here without harassment." The room was silent, every eye fixed on her, hanging on every word. In the front row sat Principal Williams, the replacement for Martinez, alongside the new coaching staff and school board members. The old administration that had enabled the harassment was gone, replaced by leaders dedicated to fostering a safer environment. "But I learned something important through this journey," Ava continued. "Bullies only have power if you give it to them. When you stand up for yourself and demand justice, they lose that power." After the assembly, Madison Clark caught up with Ava in the hallway. Now the team captain, Madison had helped shift the cheerleading program into one that emphasized inclusivity and school spirit rather than social cliques. "That was incredible," Madison said, her face lighting up with a smile. "Did you see how silent the room got when you mentioned the knife?" "They needed to hear it," Ava replied with a knowing look. "Some still think what happened to me was just boys being boys," Ava said with a slight shake of her head. "Not anymore. Not after seeing Ethan Carter on the news last week." The news coverage had severely damaged Ethan's reputation. He had gotten involved in a racial incident at the state prison, attacking a black inmate, which led to additional charges. His original 4-year sentence had been extended to 7 years. The once celebrated quarterback was now labeled a career criminal with a white supremacist reputation. "Have you heard anything about Tyler?" Madison asked, her voice low. "He's been writing letters," Ava replied, her voice calm, apologizing, asking for forgiveness. "My dad thinks he might actually be changing," Ava added thoughtfully. Tyler Knox had taken a different route in prison. After being attacked by other inmates who recognized him from the news, he had requested protective custody and began participating in educational programs. His letters to Ava, which she read but chose not to respond to, reflected sincere remorse and a growing understanding of the consequences of his actions. And Dylan, he gets out next month. His mom said he wants to transfer schools and start fresh elsewhere. Dylan Mitchell had served his full 18-month sentence and completed his community service, working with racial justice organizations. Unlike his former friends, Dylan had used his time in detention to educate himself about racism and its broader impact. His transformation seemed sincere, though Ava remained cautious about fully trusting it. That evening, Ava found her father in the basement gym, as he did every night, working out with focused determination. The gym had transformed since her training began, now filled with new equipment and displays of her achievements. New equipment, photos documenting her many achievements, and newspaper clippings detailing their hard-won victory lined the walls. "How did the assembly go?" he asked, pausing in the middle of his workout. "It went well. The kids are listening," Ava replied. Some students even shared their own experiences with harassment after the assembly. Commander Johnson smiled, a look of pride crossing his face. "You've become an incredible speaker. Harvard's lucky to have you." Ava had received a full academic scholarship to Harvard. Her essay about overcoming racial harassment and standing up for justice had impressed the admissions committee. She had received offers from 12 other universities, all eager to recruit the girl who had become a symbol of courage and resilience. "I keep thinking about what you told me that first night," she reflected, "about creating your own justice when the system fails. Do you regret it? Any of it?" Ava paused, considering the question carefully. The past year had been grueling. Death threats from white supremacist groups, constant media attention, the relentless stress of testimony and ongoing court proceedings. Yet amid all the chaos, there were unexpected rewards. The newfound friendships with students who admired her courage, respect from adults who witnessed her handle adversity with grace, and the satisfaction of knowing she had helped spark real change. "No," she replied finally. "I regret that it had to happen, but I don't regret standing up for myself." Her phone buzzed with a text from her guidance counselor. "News crew here wants an interview about the new anti-harassment policies. Interested?" "Another interview request," she told her father. "You don't have to keep doing these. You've already made such a difference here." "I know, but maybe one more student will hear it and realize they don't have to tolerate mistreatment." The changes at Westfield High had been sweeping. The new administration had rolled out zero-tolerance harassment policies, mandatory diversity training for all staff, and introduced anonymous reporting systems for students. The football program had been completely overhauled, with new coaches who valued character over victories. The cheerleading squad had become more inclusive, recruiting from all demographics and focusing on supporting the entire student body. Most notably, the school district hired Dr. Angela Foster, a nationally recognized expert in racial equity in education, as the Director of Student Safety and Inclusion. Her first initiative involved setting up peer mediation programs and restorative justice circles to address conflicts before they escalated. 2 weeks later, Ava received an unexpected visitor. Dylan Mitchell stood on her front porch, visibly nervous, accompanied by his mother and a social worker. He looked different, thinner, more mature, and his eyes no longer held the desperation she remembered from the trial, but instead, genuine remorse. "Ava, I don't expect you to forgive me," he began, his voice trembling. "I just need you to know that I now understand how wrong we were and how much pain we caused you." Ava studied him closely, seeing none of the arrogance or hatred that had fueled his participation in her harassment. Time in prison and his participation in counseling had clearly changed him, but Ava remained cautious. "What do you want from me, Dylan?" "Nothing. I just wanted to take responsibility for what I did and say that I'm sorry. Truly sorry. His mother stepped forward, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry too, Ava. I failed to raise him with the right values. I'm ashamed of what he did to you. The social worker nodded, offering a quiet affirmation. Dylan has completed extensive counseling and community service. He's committed to helping prevent what happened to you from happening to anyone else. I'm transferring to Lincoln High, Dylan added, starting over. But I wanted you to know that I understand now. What we did was wrong, and you had every right to fight back. Ava looked at the broken boy standing before her, the same one who had once helped tear apart her uniform and humiliate her in front of her peers. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a weary acknowledgement that sometimes justice looked messy and incomplete, but it was still real. I hope you've truly learned from this, Dylan. I hope you dedicate the rest of your life to ensuring no one else goes through what I endured. I will, I promise you. As they walked away, Ava felt an unexpected sense of closure. It wasn't forgiveness. She knew that would take much longer, if it ever came. But it was the realization that change was possible, even after such terrible actions. Standing at her doorstep, Ava watched as Dylan Mitchell walked out of her life for good. Ava paused, reflecting on the journey that had led her to this point. A year ago, she had been just a girl, struggling to fit into a world that had rejected her. Now she was a young woman who had shown that justice could be achieved, even when it seemed beyond reach. She had fought for her place in this world, and she had won. More importantly, she had made that space safer for those who would come after her. The battle was over. The victory was hers, and Ava Johnson was prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead.